Hey, everybody. Welcome. So sorry for starting this thing 2 minutes late. I was on another webinar that I was helping co-host, and I just was not paying attention at the time. My fault. So we've got a number of things already in the queue. Thank you very much for those who have sent in early bird specials and gotten your questions in. That's awesome. Good to see you here, Adam. I knew he was coming in hot too. So golly, Molly, we've got the gang all here. So, which is good. It's good to see you. He's even worn a collared shirt, man. I feel totally underdressed.
Crazy.
I
Are
figured
you on Tatooine?
I am on Tatooine, so.
See? Huh.
Sorry.
What?
That was very nerdy of me, sorry. Not really, it's Star Wars.
Oh. I am I'm completely oblivious to that. So anyway, yeah, I decided I'm going to wear something kind of patriotic. It's like America is still standing, which is a good thing. I'm grateful for that. And we still have businesses to serve. I'm grateful for that. So again, you guys know what the rules of thumb here are: is use the chat to harass us, Q&A, deliver your questions through the Q&A. I do have 3 questions that have already come in. Mike, you are faithful. You are usually an early bird on that, so we'll address you early on. And then I've got a couple other specific ones, some restaurants. So we'll get into that too. So Jack, I know that you've got this really good overview that you were anxious to share with us today. So you want to launch into that, and then we'll get Mr. Star Wars Adam wherever he is in whatever Star Wars scene that is. My grandkids would know, but I don't know. So Jack, take it.
Sure, well, thank you. So a lot of times I go into the statistics, and I think that I've seen varying statistics. So we'll skip that this round, and we can talk about really kind of the meat and potatoes of things. And I was looking at what are the revenue requirements for second draw eligibility, and about gross receipts, and the kind of if you were in business and not in business and that kind of thing. So I think maybe we should start there. And I'm going to read from my notes to make sure I don't get it incorrect. But so let's start out with, obviously, gross receipts loss of 25% or more across a calendar quarter when compared to an applicable time period. Notice that doesn't say it is meant to be potatoes to potatoes when it can be, but it doesn't say that exactly, okay? So gross receipts during the first, second, third, or fourth quarter in 2020 must show a 25% or more decrease from the gross receipts of the business during the same quarter in 2019. So that's the default, quarter to quarter. But then you have issues, well, was the company not in business, or are there ways to mix and match potentially? So and try to summarize that. If the company was not in business during the first or second quarter of 19, but was in business during the third and fourth quarter of 19, its gross receipts during the first, second, third, or fourth quarter of 20 must show a 25% or more decrease from the gross receipts of the business during the third or fourth quarter of 2019. Okay, so now you start getting, it's not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio that you're looking at the same quarters. And I know I'm reading this, and I don't expect you guys to take copious notes, but I just want to share just kind of the mental process of it. If the company was not in business during the first, second, or third quarter of 19, but was in business during the fourth quarter of 19, its gross receipts during the first, second, or third quarter, first, second, third, or fourth quarter of 20 must show a 25 or more decrease from the gross receipts of the business during the fourth quarter of 19. And then if it was not in business during 19, but was in business before February of 2020, so that the first 2 months of 20, month and a half essentially, gross receipts during the second, third, or fourth quarter of 20 must show a 25 or more % decrease from the gross receipts of the business during the first quarter of 2020. So what they're doing now is they're allowing for, again, a little bit of mixing and matching of time periods based on the reality of where you in business and when were you in business in 19 or 20. So that's just a basic overview of that. Then you have calculation and documentation of gross receipts, which we could go into all kinds of things. The other thing that I want to share, at least at the get-go, is that you know, who is eligible for the second draw loans. And let's see, best way to relate that. Well, we'll go into that in a minute, but because there's entities that are eligible, which is what you are. The independent contractor exclusion applies as well, because independent contractors can do it on their own and should be doing it on their own. One other thing that I do want to mention, because we've talked about this before, that's what was on my mind, is an excess loan amount error. So an excess loan amount error is a borrower or lender error made in good faith that caused the borrower to receive a PPP loan in an amount exceeding the correct maximum loan. So there are provisions that say that, you know, hey, you inadvertently got more money than you thought you should have. You can't keep it. You can't keep it, but there's consequences to it. And so talking about that. And then I'll pause there, but there are also switches as to certain dates, meaning one key date is December 27th in relation to whether you can apply for PPP2 based on the status of your PPP1. So before I dive into that, I'm going to pause because I've said a lot and I don't want to go too deep into the minutia of things before Adam gets his opening comments in.
All right, well, thank you, Jack. I'd like to talk about the firework display last night.
Pretty spectacular.
It actually was. I was very surprised and amazed at how good the firework display was, given everything else. Yeah, so I mean, the couple questions that we've had come up this week from our end, you know, one is if I acquired a business after February 15th and that business got PPP round 1, do I qualify for PP round 2? You know, that's not specifically stated in the document, but, you know, I think my thought process would be that, look, so it went in PPP round 1, which is if I bought the business, I could qualify using historic data. It would seem logical that it would follow that if I bought the business, that business got PPP1, used PPP1 appropriately, that I ought to be able to get PPP round 2. One would think. So the second thing that's come up is the whole concept of the calendar quarter. You know, the bank will be unnamed because I don't want people doing a run on that bank in case there's a chance that they just misgot the guidance. So if we do have any bankers on the line that know, we specifically heard this from the SBA and that was the correct interpretation. You know, we've had some clients that are like, hey man, when I do the calendar check, I'm not down, but I'm down for a consecutive 12-week period. All the data that we've seen, just like Jack pointed out, is they keep on referencing calendar. You know, even within the fiscal year guidance that they've got at the very end of the document, it's still, you know, calendar, but to the fiscal year. So at the same time, we did have a bank that told a customer that, hey, it could be any 12-week period. Now, it can be any 12-week period for the purposes of calculating your payroll costs under the seasonal method, but that's different from calculating a revenue decline within a time frame. So my only point in saying that is that if you look at, obviously, you know, all this is going to be conditional based on, hey, if the bank's willing to say yes, then I mean, you've taken like most of the steps in terms of you try to do everything in good faith. And at the top of the application, you know, it just says, you know, put the date range here, put the date range here, and then you do the hokey pokey. Just kidding. So if the bank would approve it, that's great. But we have not heard anything specifically, nor to my knowledge, has the SBA or the Treasury put anything out that specifically addresses hey, this could be any 12-week period that you're down. It does not have to be a calendar quarter. And in fact, the guidance they just dropped, as Jack was referencing, actually references a calendar quarter yet again. So stay tuned, stay tuned on that. It wouldn't preclude me from trying, but stay tuned. The other thing too that, again, as always, we want to pass the make it through Congress check is that it also references your method of accounting. So I probably would take a look at, if I'm a cash or accrual-based taxpayer, which a lot of our clients are, one or the other, meaning what's reported for tax purposes, not what I track internally. It wouldn't hurt to just do a sanity check on, hey man, if I ran cash basis versus cash basis, what does that look like? Or if I ran accrual basis, as long as it's consistent. But I don't think it necessarily has to be consistent with what you because you didn't have to report anything the first time. So I don't think it has to be. I think as long as you're consistent, you're fine. But I would take a look at if you've got some flexibility in the accounting method. Maybe that gets you there if you're struggling on a quarterly basis, but you can find a 12-week period.
All right, and then let me interject on going back to the first draw loans, because I mentioned that there were some key dates, and so I just want to share those. So first of all, for increases, they can only be made by the lender of record. So you can't, at least at this point, in theory, go and switch racehorses and banks on the loan. If the SBA has already remitted a forgiveness payment to the lender on the first draw, no loan increases or reapplications are allowed. So the key actor in this seems to be, and I'll share why that's also important in a moment, is the SBA basically remitting a forgiveness payment to the lender. In other words, the reimbursement to the lender. The August 8th is an important deadline that you had to receive your first draw PPP loan by that date. It was approved on or before that date, not necessarily receipt of funds. And then December 27th, as I said before, is an important date because if the lender reported to the SBA before December 27th that the borrower fully repaid the loan, in other words, there was a full repayment, and the SBA has not remitted a forgiveness payment, the borrower may reapply for a new first draw. So again, the key trigger is the SBA has not sent money back to the lender for the forgiveness part of it to make them whole on the loan to you. But if that has happened, then you're not eligible for the for a re-up or increase on your first draw. And then if the borrower did not accept before December 27th, the loan forgiveness, or it hasn't been processed, didn't accept the full amount, then you can proceed and move forward. So my point in that, and not going any deeper, is that there are a lot of rules, whether you can or can't, and you don't really have enough time to go through that. And I think it'd be very confusing to go through all that, because really you just, as you've done before with your actual application, for the loan, with your forgiveness application, you just got to go through it and see if you get over those hurdles, on kind of yes, no, I'm in, I'm out on various to get to the finish line of the process, essentially. So, all right.
All right. Well, I've got a couple questions teed up for you guys, and I'm going to, Mike, you're going to be the second because this one actually came in ahead of you. And this is a restaurant. So here's the situation. The best South African vegan restaurant in all of Charlotte, Noda. It's called Oh My Soul. It's actually quite good. These guys formed in September 2019, but they didn't open their doors until 2/27/2020. Their first payroll was run in March 2020. So would they qualify for PPP first draw? They never got funds in the first round because they didn't think that they qualified, because what they understood was you have to have a payroll on 2/15/2020 to qualify. So that is the question. would they qualify since they didn't open their doors till 2/27 and their first payroll was March 2020?
I think our interpretation of this is you had to have been incorporated. And I mean, the only thing that you'd have is Jack's on mute. So I mean, the thing where you wouldn't necessarily want to be disingenuous, though, in this specific case, I think this applies to a lot of people, is, while the guidance isn't super specific, I mean, it basically just says, look, if you're open late, it addresses if you open later, then go back and just compare to Q1 2020 relative to Q1 of 2021. Or any other quarter during the time period, because that's the only quarter that you have. Well, I feel like what would be disingenuous would be to say, yeah, but I was only open for 30 days in that quarter. So, by default, maybe every quarter was always better, because I was only open for 30 days. So I just, I think you got to use some subjectivity a little bit to say, look, I've got to actually really compare like a 30-day time period, even though it's a whole quarter. So Jack, you have some thoughts?
Yes. Well, the thing, my challenge is I've seen it stated differently in different places. So not in operation on February 15th, not in business. I have not seen necessarily didn't have a payroll prior to. I haven't seen that language, but what's been given to us is guidance, and so that there's more to come on all this stuff as far and similarly to what we experienced several months ago on PPP1, a realignment of what is supposed to be done, a reactionary realignment, even though they probably got more of it right this time as far as the process goes. And as we talked about last week, the technology is supposed to be better, that there's still going to be a lot of course corrections, I think, with respect to implementation on this, because of things like the language that they put in there that could be interpreted in different directions, which is obviously very material. I mean, this is fundamental to whether or not you can actually even play the game or not.
Yeah. So like in this specific case, I would definitely give it a shot. I mean, because you had operations, at some point during that first quarter, and assuming that's at least you hit the first bar that you were incorporated by February 15th. Because if you think about the intent of that was really to make sure that, people weren't magically becoming businesses as soon as it seemed like there was government cheese to be handed out.
Yeah, so the recommendation, they were with one of the large banks in town, weren't getting much help. And so I've recommended a couple smaller regional banks that have been very good on PPP round one, that they contact them directly. Because I think, at the end of the day, bank to bank, they do have some interpretation nuances, it seems like. So that was my recommendation. So anyway, Mike, your question is next. This is the one that we got from Mike this morning. So my question today relates to employee retention tax credit. In particular, we're trying to figure out if we are eligible for this retroactively into 2020. The language we're looking at is, quote, eligible employers were determined to include those that were partially or fully shut down due to government orders. We're trying to figure out if we were partially shut down due to the government orders. IRS seems to see that if you were impacted by COVID-19 and at least part of your business was considered non-essential, then you can claim this credit. Is this how you see it? Is there any documentation that we need to prove this?
No, the way that I had interpreted it is that, I mean, sure, that's an important consideration. So basically what, why you would ever do this, I have no idea. But here's the scenario they're trying to avoid is, I'm the buggy whip manufacturer. There's no more demand for buggy whips, but I'm going to keep some employees on and apply for credit. Well, in that case, market forces just said, you're going down in flames. We're in a global pandemic. pretty much everybody was impacted somehow by a government order, one way or the other, because everything rolls downstream. So in this particular case, I would be applying for the credit if I met the qualifying criteria, which was a reduction in gross receipts, again, on a comparative basis, and you keep on claiming the credit until your gross receipts are restored. And the only, caveat there is that, let's say that you had an 8-week window that you were using PPP money, you can't be claiming the credit for any salary dollars that you also use PPP funds for. But as soon as your PPP funds were exhausted, you're still paying people, you still meet the qualifying criteria, it's credit on. I mean, that was the whole point of this thing.
Cool. Next question is in from Joe. My business suffered a 27% decline in billings in Q1 2020 versus Q1 2019, but the biggest hits occurred in January, February, and the first half of March. Because the general perception of COVID's impact seems to be based on the March 2020 timeframe, and in light of our business impact occurring early in Q1, am I still eligible for a round 2 loan? And if yes, am I at risk of non-forgiveness?
I mean, I thought they were pretty clear. I mean, Jack can hop in and recite the criteria again if Jack would like to, but I mean, it's any quarter, and it doesn't matter if it was early on. So I kind of feel like if you met the qualifying criteria, you meet the qualifying criteria.
Yeah, I would, I'm not going to recite the criteria again, but they are, when I saw this, it was, okay, map it out. If you can, if you can map it like this, quarter to quarter, and, if not, then you have other options that allow you to dip into non-synchronous quarters from the past in order to make that work. But I'm not sure, when you say risk of non-forgiveness, is that because you're not meeting the 25% decline when you're matching up the quarters? So
I think what a lot of people are concerned about is I had a crappy first quarter, I'm at 27%, but on the year, I'm only down 10%, or on the year, I'm flat. You know what? That, in that scenario, it still says you qualify. So then you start getting into, but I warrant that it's needed. I mean, how can any of us know that it's needed? Unless you've got, in my opinion, unless I have my sales number in the bag in the form of customer deposits that are non-refundable sitting in my bank account, it's hard for anyone to say they got this in the bag.
That makes sense. It's kind of a quiet crowd here. We got the early birds jumped in fast, and then Joe jumped on. Do you guys have any other questions, for these guys, before Adam has to get shuttled out on some sort of Star Wars, hovercraft or something like that into his next thing?
I took a look actually in the background. I was looking at, we had mentioned it last week, of the SBA website that's been retooled a little bit, I think a little better organized. And so, I'm looking at it now, and it goes into first draw, second draw. I haven't clicked through to see if it has all the information I just said about the linking up the quarters. I'm sure it does. The information I was reading from was from a summary that was provided by the International Franchise Association to its members. And so it basically cliff notes on that, but I'm sure it's in there because I'm looking at, supplemental materials, affiliation rules, and talks about forgiveness, lender information, again, first draw, second draw, and then also has, if you're curious, PPP data for as approved loans. And then does it by state? Does it by other reports as far as rounds, forgiveness submissions, payment summaries? So interesting Trivial Pursuit information if you're interested. But more importantly, it has, I think, a lot of the guidance directly from the horse's mouth, from the SBA website, for you to take a look at.
All right, next question is up from Joe. Joe, I am glad to see you here too. We got two Joes that are asking questions. So this one says, have most of the participants already applied for PPP round 2? Ours was submitted to the SBA through Aquesta Tuesday afternoon. Haven't heard anything back from the SBA yet.
I think we're probably, if you just look at our population of clients, it's pretty limited in terms of people that have even applied yet, and that was primarily because their lender was not prepared to accept the application yet, which is just now starting to trickle in, sort of like we thought would happen when they first announced PPP2. We said kind of probably third week in January, plan on into January funding early February, and that seems like that's how the timing's kind of panning out.
Yeah, and I would say that there are various places of, if you're Catholic, purgatory. If not Catholic, then holding pens, where it could be, whether it's with the bank in their holding pattern, if it's with the SBA. The SBA has, I mean, once it goes to the SBA, there's a clock that starts ticking. But until that happens, it's really the discretion of the bank to do what they will as far as accepting them in the first place, and then reviewing them, and then processing them and shuttling them over into the SBA system.
I thought this was interesting too. There was a Forbes article that came out, it was updated yesterday, on non-bank lenders accepting round 2 PPP applications. And I know at the end of round 1, when the doors were closing rapidly, Cabbage was one of those that we sent some folks to that actually did get approved through that. So Blue Vine, Cornerstone, Fountainhead, Harvest Small Business Finance, Cabbage with a K, Lindustry, New Tech, Ready Capital, Square Capital, The Loan Source, and Biz2 Credit. But if you go online and look under Forbes, there's a Forbes article, and just say non-bank lenders, you'll find it. Hopefully that helps, Joe. Any other questions out there? Joe, you were on it, man.
So a reminder that there's some very convincing fraudsters out there that, if you go beyond your CPA, your lawyers, et cetera, for help, that there are entities out there, people out there that are offering their help. And, many of them are legit, but some of them are not. But they're very convincing, their websites. So when you go check them out, and this is what's been reported to me by some of my partners and some clients that have said, yeah, I was looking at this and I got this solicitation. Is it legit? And I start doing some digging, and even like on this person's LinkedIn profile, but then you keep digging more, or the company's LinkedIn profile. You dig in some more and you find out, oh, well, this company, once they got you, they haven't been as responsive or responsive at all, and that kind of thing. So just be careful about that. I don't know if they're going, this is switching gears, I don't know if in most cases the money will show up in your bank account, but there are still, and I don't know the rhyme or reason to the algorithm for doing this, but actually getting like a debit card in the mail, or something that looks not so maybe legit or kind of hokey, but it is the real thing. So while I say be very careful, be careful not to throw something away that you're like, this is weird, too good to be true. Always check and validate what you've received and what you're doing online.
Yeah, it's funny. We received a solicitation ourselves, and it was, it actually looked like it was coming from our bank or was bank approved. That was asking if we, effectively saying, hey, it's time to ask for forgiveness. Presumably had I clicked through, I would have been offered, they would have asked me to pay for something, but it just, I feel like, to Jack's point, this isn't a shameless plug. It's just more like, those that helped you get here go back to the same spot, potentially, versus just clicking on a random solicitation. So just be careful.
Few more questions that have just come in. One is, do we need to be concerned regarding PPP forgiveness for PPP 2 if our cash on hand has grown substantially due to PPP 1? We met the stated eligibility requirements for PPP 2.
I don't think so, because I mean, everything that's been out there is basically said, look, I mean, as long as you feel like, hey, I don't know, or there still is unknown, you're fine. And, it would be expected that some cash balances would accumulate if you had a delayed downturn, or your potential problem is going to be, sometime in the future.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be additional, and I can see the argument that it kind of resets your financials to look like something different than it looked before you got the money, even if you've used it and kept some of it or still have some of it in the bank. I mean, it brings up an interesting question when you have transfers of businesses, or you have, in one of our cases, a departing owner during COVID last year, and we're trying to price out what the buyout is. And now it's, well, okay, well, wait a minute. If you get PPP2 money and you got PPP1 money, what does that mean as far as the value of the business? So from that perspective, it potentially is very relevant and changes the numbers, at least from the perspective of the departing owner. We represent the company. And of course, we're saying, well, wait a minute, how long are we going to continue to have this potential contingent payout, like some sort of, earn out based on getting more money that might be forgiven for a period of time that you were an owner. So, but I think to Adam's point, it's the change in your financials because of the additional money. I don't think, and I haven't seen that it somehow disqualifies you from getting the PPP2 money.
That's right.
All right. Next question is from Carrie. Are there any updates or guidance on the payroll tax deferral date? A client of ours was told by their payroll company that Social Security deferral date ends on 12/31/21. Is that right?
Yeah, that they didn't make any updates to that. The only portion that it's funny, I gave bad advice to a client and I had to correct myself. What they did update was the, hey, Gary, you can opt in as an employee to defer your payroll taxes, which pretty much nobody did. But the employer side, they didn't make a change on that. Could that change in the future? Possibly, but they did not make a change on it as part of the legislation that came out. And it's hard to say, was that intentional or an oversight?
Given the government, you never know. So,
Lordy.
You just don't know. I'm not going to comment. Right. So from Joe, this is a shout out to Aquesta. My banker at Aquesta has been great. Received an online application on Friday just before 5 p.m. and completed it by 7. Wow, that is awesome. And his wife was patient and kept dinner waiting for him. That's you got the double play there, man. That's awesome. Any other questions out there?
So while we're waiting, and it's 36 minutes in, I just feel compelled to reward the people who have stayed on, right? So here's today's little thing. And a $10 Starbucks card, electronic Starbucks card, which is actually pretty cool. So here's a little side note. So a lot of us don't feel comfortable with, or we're not going out and having our coffees and things like that for business development and that kind of thing. So found a way to put our logo on an electronic Starbucks gift cards. So I will send you one to the first person who tells me, and Adam and Gary, you can't play along, but tells me the name of the song that these lyrics come from. Because I was listening to this the other day. give you a hint. It was on A's on 8 because that's what I listen to in the car a lot. So in the warrior's code, there's no surrender. Though his body says stop, his spirit cries never. Deep in our soul, a quiet ember knows it's you against you. It's the paradox that drives us on. It's a battle of wills in the heat of attack. It's the passion that kills. The victory is yours alone. Now, if I were to, my cadence were a little different, I think you could get it. Oh, wow.
Oh,
Snap. Richard.
Richard.
Even said the band too.
That
So Burning Heart by Survivor from Rocky.
Richard Morel, woo baby.
Rocky 4, that's correct.
That's right. And I think it was when he was running through Siberia.
Yes.
With a few, nothing like a good training montage.
Woo.
All right.
Well,
good.
Richard,
Congratulations.
good job. So I will send you Richard's contact information, Jack. Because
Okay.
he's a friend and he's a client. So.
Very good.
Oh, no. You can drink green tea. You're going to have to get into green
Or
tea.
get
Or something
yourself
like
a nice sandwich or a sous vide egg bite. They've got plenty of options there at Starbucks.
There you go. You can even get some pretty good pastries. Oh, Joe Gass, good to see you too, bud. All right. Any other questions or I guess 80s hair band trivia for Jack?
I'm gonna have to make it harder next time.
Yeah.
He was quick on that trigger.
My mind is still blown. My head is spinning. All right. Well, I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds before we're going to sign off because I know Adam is leading a planning session for one of our clients today. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Make it happen, baby. All right. So just as a reminder, we will put this thing up on the YouTube channel, the BGW CPA YouTube channel. It'll be up later on this afternoon for anybody that came on late. Hopefully we addressed your questions. We plan on being back here, same time, same place, next Thursday, the last Thursday of the month of January. Can you believe that we're almost through January already?
Amen.
What is up?
Yes. And no disasters yet.
Yeah, thank goodness. We all have electricity. That's a beautiful thing. And it's a good thing. So anyway, thank you everybody for being on here. We appreciate you. Hopefully we've brought some value. I know we've brought some entertainment. Somebody raised a hand, but if you have a question, hit me up in the Q&A because we're going to sign off. I just saw a little note that said somebody raised a hand and I can't figure out where it is. So anyway.
All right, guys.
Maybe that was a inadvertent hand hitter. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Great rest of the week. Great weekend coming up. And we will talk to you again. Thank you, Adam and Jack. See you guys.